Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. In this episode we're going to be looking at this Hornby Merchant Navy that's been sent in to me by Dave and Aoife. Now this is in several parts. The chassis is in this bubble wrap here, and we can see that some of the side rods and piston rods on this Loco are badly bent out of shape and broken. Dave tells me this model hasn't run in some time, and it's also missing a blanking plate there, so I'm going to have to source one of those before we can test the motor. But Dave's also sent a DCC chip for this, so we're going to try and repair it and DCC fit it, ready for sending back and use on their railway. Having a look at this now, we can see that with the battery test there is nothing from the main driving wheels at all, so we're going to have to look at the potential pickup issue, which is prevalent on these Chinese built Hornby Locos, as they rely on a friction fit for the pickups to the main wires on the chassis there. But testing the battery on the tender drawbar, we will see that the motor actually does work quite well. I'm just looking there to make sure there's no broken wires or anything, but then when I put the battery on the terminals, you can see the drive wheels start to turn. So at least we know this model is not completely dead. It is just the Loco driving wheel pickups that are problematic. A battery test on the track also proves that this isn't picking up any electricity from the track at all. So I'm going to start by looking at these bent side rods. They're all wedged up there, and you can see that one's badly bent and has actually come off the rivet. But Dave has actually sent a replacement part, so we'll try and get that fitted. I'm going to remove the tender and the Loco body shell from the Hornby box, and you can see that they are quite dusty, having not been used in quite some time. So they're all going to need a good dust up and a good clean. The detail packs there remains unopened. Yeah, this is covered in dust from where it's been laying in the box, and the tender wheels are slightly oxidised, so everything's going to need a very thorough clean. The retaining screw has handily been kept in the body shell there, although this whistle part here is bent off, so that will need resecuring later on. I do like these Merchant Navy Locos, and indeed I'm a fan of any bullied Pacific. They're very handsome Locos indeed. Now, to start by stripping this Loco, you need to remove the front bogie there and the associated screw, and then I also remove the trailing truck, although this is held in place with some wires, so it doesn't go very far, but you need to remove this screw and spring assembly to remove the chassis keeper plate to access those pickups, to adjust them so that they actually work and do the job they were designed to do. So upending this now into my Loco cradle, I'm going to remove all the screws holding that keeper plate in place, and then we'll have a look at the state of the pickups that we've got underneath this plastic plate here. I don't think this Loco's ever been taken apart before, as all the screws had very good heads on, and they were quite tight. As you can see there, the pickups rely on push fit onto lugs that are mounted onto the die-cast body shell, and one pushes onto a rivet that's actually got a wire soldered to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this part out, just pull that wire through there, remove the pickups, give them a good clean, and I'm also going to touch them up with solder, something that I've done on all of these sort of Chinese made Locos from Hornby. I'm going to touch the brass parts up with solder, so there's a small lug for the die-cast chassis parts to press against, ensuring good electrical contact. There is absolutely no lubrication in this model either. It is absolutely bone dry. There's not even remnants of old lubrication, which I'm surprised about. Just look how clean this cotton bud comes out that's been dipped in meths. There is nothing on this model at all. There's no remnants of anything, so this is going to all need a good lubrication before we can return it to running order. I've never seen this before, as usually the factory lubrication goes sticky, and there's always some remnants of it, but there's absolutely nothing in this model at all. Almost like it's had no lubrication from when it left the factory. So I'm just oiling up the wheels here and the bearings, and I'm also going to put some silicone grease on the drive gear there, as like I said, there was absolutely nothing on it. So I'm just going to give the pickups a quick clean with the cotton bud dipped in methylated spirits, which is my usual method, just to remove the slight amount of gunk and fluff that has gathered in what I assume is this Loco's very short period of running life, as there doesn't seem to be any wear and tear on this model whatsoever. So here you can see I'm just looking at the pickups there, and you can see there the additional solder that I've put onto that tab there on the left hand side, and that will ensure good contact once this is reassembled. I've also done the other one on the other side, and I've refit the pickups now back into the keeper plate there, and I'm just going to give it a quick battery test to see if adding that solder has made a difference. And as you can see, the Loco is now picking up power from the drive wheels as it should. So with tender pickup as well, this should prove to be a very reliable runner. Removing this small part here enables you to get to the worm gear of the motor, which again is also bone dry. There's absolutely no lubrication in there whatsoever. There is nothing on my finger at all apart from the odd remnants of a very small amount of grease. So cleaning off what little remained of the original Hornby grease, I'm going to add some silicone grease and a small bit of oil just to make sure that the whole gear train and the worm there is well lubricated to prevent excess wear when this model returns to Dave and Aoife for use on their layout. I just apply the silicone grease there with a cotton bud, and then add a small amount of oil along the top just so that it spreads nicely through the entire gear train. There's absolutely nothing in this motor housing there. Look, it is absolutely bone dry. I'm just going to replace that screw there, and then we'll look at the side rods on this model. And as I said, Dave has very kindly sent a replacement part already with this to save me sourcing my own. Also going to add a small amount of oil to the rear bearing there on the motor. It is important that all these bearings are kept well lubricated. So here's the replacement part that's been sent over by Dave, and I'm going to replace this in its entirety. I did initially try and repair the side rods, but the rivet, although it pushed back into the hole on the side rods, the retaining clip on the back of it had worn away, so that is really no good anymore. So to replace these side rod mountings, you have to remove the DCC decoder socket, which is held in place with 2 screws, to reveal yet another screw that's underneath this that also needs removing, to remove the weight which allows you to lift off the entire side rod segment in one go. Although the pickup wire from the chassis to the DCC interface is in the way, and I'm going to have to unsolder it from the DCC board to allow this this side rod part to come out. It wasn't until much later that I realised that this actually comes apart into 2 units, so it isn't really necessary to unsolder the wire. But hey ho, every day's a school day, and it's something I'd never repaired before. So that's the old unit removed, and I'll keep that in my spares box in case there's any usable parts for in the future. And the replacement part, like I said, is already in 2 parts. So I'm going to firstly fit the front bit there and fit the slide bars and piston rods into the cylinder block. And then once that's put in, I'm going to just remove the cylinder block for ease of refitment. If you there are guide holes in the cylinder block, and you just slide them in gently, just like that, and then they push home. If they're not pushing home, don't force it, otherwise you could end up breaking the cylinder block, or indeed breaking the brand new side rod module that you've only just purchased. So once that's in place, I put the cylinder block back in place and reattach the screw, and then refit this part onto the rear there and link it all together with the plastic lugs, and then refit all the screws that we took off before, refit the wire, or should I say resolder the wire onto the DCC interface, and then screw the interface back into place using the screws we removed earlier. Like I said, removing the wire was a bit overkill, as it wasn't needed, but like I said, I didn't know that before. Now, using a hex nut driver, I'm just going to screw in the tiny little hex nuts that keep the side rods all in place. And then once that's done, although this did prove a little bit tricky, as I think the middle wheel on the crank pin here had been threaded slightly, so it took a long while to get the screw to adhere to its thread. And I've also added a new wire there because the one that was on it didn't seem long enough and was pulling rather tight when the rear pony truck was going around the corner. But now all the wires have been resoldered. I'm just going to give it a quick test to see if that them side rods are working okay. That one there needs some sort of adjustment as it's not running quite as smoothly as I wanted it to, although the one on the other side was running really nicely. I'm now going to refit the front pony wheels there using the screw we moved before. As I've said in many trash to tracks, don't over tighten your screws as you can end up de-threading it and actually breaking or warping the plastic parts. So now all the parts have been reassembled onto the chassis. You can see they're giving it a quick battery test. It is running rather nicely, considering that it wouldn't run at all when we first got this model. So turning my attention to the body shell, all this needs is a good dusting over with an old makeup brush, and using a very small amount of Loctite super glue, I'm going to reattach that whistle rod that seems to have come off just near the dome there. So I'm just going to remove excess super glue with that cotton bud and then hold it back in place on the body shell with finger pressure, and then once that's set, the body shell will be ready for refitment onto the chassis. Like I said, I do like these merchant navies. I mean, just look at the detail in that nameplate, the French line CGT and the flag and the legible merchant navy class. These really are superb models for their age. These were first released in about 2001 and they still stand up to more modern models. Now to fit the decoder, just going to plug it in there with the orange wire in decoder slot number 1. And I'm just testing to make sure there's plenty of room inside the body shell for the decoder to fit. And then by reattaching the chassis, although the footage here isn't good enough, I'd just move the camera to a bad angle. But you refit the chassis by engaging 2 rear lugs at the back of the body shell, and then the front of the chassis just pushes home gently, and then you can refit the securing screw. I'm just giving it a quick battery test there just to make sure that no wires have come loose whilst refitting the body shell, although the pickups on the front drive wheel there did prove problematic and needed further adjustment, although I didn't film that as it was just a case of bending the brass parts to touch the wheel backs. The tender itself was given a good brush over with the brush just to remove all that stuck on dust, and then I cleaned all the tender wheels up using a fiberglass pencil and a methylated spirit soaked cotton bud. You will see here just how oxidised these wheels were, as you will see the shine on the wheel I've just cleaned. Once I've given it a wipe with this cotton bud, compared to the wheel next to it, you can see just how shiny that wheel actually is and how dirty the others are. So now I'm just adjusting the pickups and giving the pickups a clean in the tender there by removing the tender chassis base plate. All the wheel backs were cleaned on the tender, and the pickups were cleaned and adjusted to remove some of the drag that was present. So they all touch the wheel backs now, but they don't cause any drag so that the wheels turn. And just testing everyone with the battery, you can see the drive wheels are all turning. So this Loco is now picking up on 12 of its wheels, just as it should have done. This should prove to be a nice reliable runner when it returns to Dave and Aoife's layout. Just reattaching all the screws there for the tender base plate, and then I'm going to reattach the brake rigging and coupling, and then we're getting towards the end of this rebuild. I did think this was going to be quite labour intensive repairing the side rods on this, but it was actually refreshing change to be quite a simple rebuild. Using the battery to power the wheels using the rear tender pickups, I'm going to give the wheels a clean, and then I'm just going to give one final test on all the wheels to make sure they're driving, and this Merchant Navy has been completely rebuilt and is ready to go back into service. So let's have a look at what we started with at the start of this trash to track. This Merchant Navy was in quite a poor state with its broken side rods, the body shell and chassis were separated, and it wouldn't pick up any power from any of its wheels due to severe oxidisation and dirt buildup. So we've repaired it. We've repaired the whistle on the top there, replaced the cylinders, replaced the side rods, cleaned all the wheels up and given it a service, and this is what she looks like now. Fully rebuilt, we've got a Merchant Navy worthy of the standard that Bullied would have expected himself. These models really are superb, and I'm pleased to see that we've returned this model from the trash back to the track. I'm going to leave you now with some shots of this Merchant Navy running around my layout before I send it back to Dave and Aoife. If you've got an engine you'd like to see featured on a future episode of Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com, which is the email address you see on screen now, and we'll have a look at getting it sent over, and it might even feature in a Trash to Track episode all of its own. Thanks again for watching Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.